구독해주면 안 되겠니?
안녕하세요. 좋은 밤입니다. 오랜만에 ASMR 하는 날인데 다들 하루 잘 마무리하고 계셨나요? 벌써 다음 주면은 9월이 끝나요. 다음 주가 9월 30일이야. 시간 너무 빨라. 확실히 해가 지면은 이제 시원시원해가지고 좋은 것 같아. 아, 덥다라는 날씨들이 조금씩 없어지고 있어요. 감기 걸릴 수도 있기 때문에 혹시라도 오랫동안 밖에 나가 계시는 분들은 외투 하나씩은 가져가시는 거 추천드려요. 안녕하세요. 좋은 밤입니다. 적응이 안 된다고요? 적응해 보시는 건 어떠신가요? 안녕. 좋은 밤입니다. 편하게 누우셔서 들으시면 됩니다. 숨을 쉬고 숨을 뱉고 눈을 감고 하시면 됩니다. 이어폰을 끼시면은 더 좋은 경험을 하실 수 있습니다. 간질간질 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 제목은 The Lottery입니다. The morning of June 27th was clear and sunny, with the fresh warmth of fall summer day. The flowers were blossoming profusely, and the grass was richly green. The people of the village began to gather in the square between the post office and the bank. Around 10 o'clock in some towns, there were so many people that the lottery took 2 days and had to be started on June 2nd. But in this village, where there were only about 300 people, the whole lottery took less than 2 hours, so it could begin at 10 o'clock in the morning and still be through in time to allow the villagers to get home for noon dinner. The children assembled first, of course. School was recently over for the summer. The feeling of liberty sat uneasily on most of them. They tended to gather together quietly for a while before they broke into boisterous play, and their talk was still of the classroom and the teacher, of books and reprimands. Bobby Martin had already stuffed his pockets full of stones, and the other boys soon followed his example, selecting the smoothest and the roundest stones. Bobby and Harry Jones and Dickie Delacroix, the villagers pronounced this name, Delacroix, eventually made a great pile of stones in one corner of the square and guarded it against the raids of the other boys. The girls stood aside, talking among themselves, looking over their shoulders at rolled in the dust or clung to their hands of their older brothers or sisters. Soon the men began to gather, serving their own children, speaking of planting the rain, tractors and taxes. They stood together away from the pile of stones in the corner, and their jokes were quiet, and they smiled rather than laughed. The women, wearing faded house dresses and sweaters, came shortly after the men folk. They greeted one another and exchanged bits of gossip as they went to join their husbands. Soon the women, standing by their husbands, began to call to their children, and the children came reluctantly, having to be called 4 or 5 times. Bobby Martin ducked under his mother's grasping hands and ran, laughing, back to the pile of stones. His father spoke up sharply, and Bobby came quickly and took his place between his father and his oldest brother. The lottery was conducted, as were the square dances, the teen club, the Halloween program by Mr. Summers, who had time and energy to devote to civic activities. He was a round-faced, jovial man, and he ran the coal business, and people were sorry for him, because he had no children and his wife was a scold. When he arrived in the square carrying the black wooden box, there were murmurs of conversations among the villagers, and he waved and called, "Little late today, folks." The postmaster, Mr. Graves, followed him, carrying a 3-legged stool, and the stool was put in the center of the square, and Mr. Summers sat the black box down on it. The villagers kept their distance, leaving a space between themselves and the stool. And when Mr. Summers said, Some of you fellows want to give me a hand? There was a hesitation between two men. Mr. Martin and his oldest son, Baxter, came forward to hold the box steady on the stool while Mr. Summers stirred up the papers inside. 잘 듣고 계십니까? 계속 읽겠습니다. The original paraphernalia for the lottery had been lost long ago. The black box, now resting on the stool, had been put into use even before Old Man Warner, the oldest man in town, was born. Mr. Summers spoke frequently to the villagers about making a new box, but no one liked to accept even as much tradition as was represented by the black box. There was a story that the present box had been made with some pieces of the box that had preceded it, the one that had been constructed when the first people settled down to make a village here. Every year after the lottery, Mr. Summers began talking again about a new box. But every year the subject was allowed to fade off without anything being done. 내가 근데 읽고 있는데 뭔가 영어가 완벽하지 않은 사람이 쓴 것 같아. 말이 조금 안 되는 문법들이 있어. 자, 이번 짧은 어린이 동화책은 하이크, The Hike이라는 제목입니다. Mandy was lucky as she and her mother lived with her grandparents, and she liked nothing better. She liked nothing better than to spend time with her grandfather. You see, he was always making something. She enjoyed watching, learning, and sometimes even helping him finish whatever he was doing. Grandfather, what are you building in your workshop today? Mandy asked. She giggled as she said, It looks like you're playing with two long sticks. Well, Mandy, he said, I am going to make two walking sticks with your help. One for you and one for me. Then I have a surprise. All right, Mandy shrieked. Where do I start? After some time, Mandy, with her grandfather's help, finished the walking sticks. They were two of the most beautiful walking sticks she had ever seen. With the bark removed, they were sanded, smoothed. Each had a funny-looking face carved in them. These are really nice, Mandy said. But just what do we do with them? Oh, that is a surprise, said the grandfather. Tomorrow morning, we're going on a hike in the woods, and these walking sticks will help make the hike easier. So now it's time to clean up and go to sleep, so we are well rested for the hike. The next morning, Mandy did not need an alarm to wake her. She was up, dressed, and ready to go as the sun rose and the day began. She went to the kitchen and saw that her grandfather was busy packing sandwiches, water, snacks, and the other items into their backpacks. It looks like we're going to be hiking for a long time, Mandy said. It will be an all-day hike, he replied. I think we have everything, so grab your walking stick and let's go. What about breakfast? Mandy asked. Oh, did I forget to mention that we're going to stop and have breakfast at a diner? He said with a smile. So their journey began. After a great breakfast and a long drive, they arrived at the base of a mountain and began their trail. This is beautiful, Mandy said. Just where are we hiking? To the very top of the mountain where we'll have our lunch. Rest and maybe take a swim. And then hike back down, he replied. Swim, Mandy said excitedly. Is there a lake on the top of the mountain? Yes, her grandfather replied. There's a pond surrounded by big flat rocks. It was carved from mountains during the last ice age and is filled with clear, cold water. Wow, was all Mandy could say. As they hiked up the mountain, Mandy asked many questions. What kind of tree is that? How high are we? Are there bears around here? Are there any other people up here? What do we do if we get lost? Are there snakes? And of course, are we there yet? Her grandfather answered her questions the best he could and explained that they were in a very natural area, so not many people, but all sorts of wildlife, even bears. He helped her understand and respect the natural beauty around them, particularly the animals. He taught her how to use a compass and things to help them be safe while they hiked. Like before stepping over a log, put your walking stick on the other side to let any animal, like a snake, know you're there. Whistle a song or make some noise to let bigger animals know that you're in the area. In a soft voice, her grandfather said, Mandy, there are a few things to remember when you're hiking, or anywhere for that matter. The earth is our mother. Take care of her. All life is sacred. Treat all life with respect. Take from the earth what is needed and nothing more. Enjoy your journey, but leave no tracks. As they hiked a little further, the forest opened, and Mandy saw the pond surrounded by flat rocks. They had arrived, and it was almost like being in a different world. Mandy picked a large rock that extended out into the water for them to rest on it. It had been warmed by the sun, was the perfect place for lunch. As her grandfather unpacked their food, she leaned over and wiggled her fingers in the cold water. Immediately, several small fish came by and nibbled at her fingers. She shrieked in surprise, and then, realizing the fish were just curious, placed her hand back into water and watched as the fish darted around her fingers. She laughed and played with the fish until she heard her grandfather say, "Time for lunch." After lunch and a resting period, they took a swim. The water was deep and Mandy couldn't reach the bottom no matter how hard she tried. She giggled each time a curious fish nibbled at her body and watched a deer come down to have a drink. It was a wonderful day, and she was saddened when she heard her grandfather say, "Mandy, it's time to dry off and begin the hike down to the car." After making sure everything was just like it was when they arrived, they began their hike down the mountain. After a short time, Mandy asked, "Grandfather, can we take a different trail down the mountain?" "I don't see why not," he replied. After a short time, the trail blending into the surrounding brush and then disappeared. "I'm scared," Mandy said. "I think we're lost." "No, we're not lost," her grandfather said. "But we aren't on a trail, so we will have to continue hiking down the mountain in the direction of the car. Just enjoy the surroundings and being together on our first hiking adventure." As they continued down, Mandy said, "Grandfather, I have a problem at school and I don't know who to talk to." "Then talk to me," he said. "I like to, but you're my grandfather and you may get angry because you're a family and not, well, like a friend." Now Mandy's grandfather had to do something serious thinking. After all, she was right that her grandfather he may get angry or his feelings hurt, but she needed a big person as a friend. Mandy, he said in a serious tone, if I were to promise that anything we talked about would stay between us, and that I would not get angry or talk to you as your grandfather, but rather as an old friend, would you talk to me? Is that a promise? She asked. Yes, he said. And you know, I've never broken a promise to you. She gave him a big hug and began to talk. Soon they were at the bottom of the mountain, unpacking the car. Before leaving, her grandfather thought for a minute and said, Granddaughter, anytime you need a friend and not your grandfather, pick up your walking stick and ask to go on a hike. It will be our secret code. This was the best day ever, Wendy said. I was with my grandfather, my new best friend, and I have a talking walking stick. 이라는 스토리였습니다.
엄마 배 니글니글 아빠 배 니글니글 아기도 집에 가 니글니글해 아기도 집에 가 니글니글해